Hi, have you ever wondered what if working less actually made you more productive? In this Insibook summary of rest, showing that real success comes not from burnout, but from deliberate rest. Backed by science and history's greatest minds, this book proves that rest isn't a luxury, it's a strategy. So, work smarter, rest deeper, achieve more. We live in a world obsessed with productivity, a relentless drive to do more. We champion the hustle, the late nights, the constant connection, often wearing our busyness as a badge of honor. But what if this relentless pursuit is fundamentally misguided? What if the secret to achieving more and perhaps more importantly, living a richer, more meaningful life, isn't about squeezing every last second out of the day, but about embracing the power of rest? This isn't about laziness or shirking responsibility. It's about understanding rest not as the opposite of work, but as an essential active ingredient for meaningful work and a fulfilling life. The prevailing culture often paints a stark dichotomy: work or leisure. Work is virtuous, necessary, the engine of progress. Leisure is seen as downtime, a necessary evil to recover energy for more work. Or worse, a sign of indulgence or lack of ambition. We're encouraged to optimize our work time, to eliminate distractions, to focus intensely, often leading to burnout, diminished creativity, and a nagging sense that something is missing. We might produce more in the short term, but the quality suffers, our well-being erodes, and the deep satisfaction that comes from truly impactful work remains elusive. This book invites us to fundamentally rethink this equation, to recognize that the most productive and creative periods are often born from a deliberate and intentional approach to rest. It argues that we get more done, and crucially, better done, when we learn to work less, but more effectively, by strategically integrating periods of genuine restoration. Think about the rhythm of our own lives. We experience cycles. Perhaps you notice that after a few days of intense focus on a project, your mind starts to wander, your energy dips, and even simple tasks feel like wading through mud. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's a natural signal. Our capacity for focused, productive work is finite within any given period. Pushing past these natural limits doesn't yield better results. It leads to diminishing returns, mistakes, and eventually, exhaustion. The conventional wisdom tells us to push harder, take a short break, and then push again. But the deeper truth, revealed through the lives of history's most creative and productive individuals, and supported by modern science, is that we need more substantial, restorative breaks, periods of rest that are as purposeful as our work. This restorative power isn't passive. It's not simply about collapsing on the couch after a long day, though physical recovery is important. It's about engaging in activities that allow different parts of ourselves to come alive, activities that replenish our mental, physical, and spiritual reserves. We need to cultivate what could be called productive rest, times deliberately set aside to step away from the demands of our primary tasks, allowing our minds and bodies to recover, reset, and even generate new insights. This type of rest isn't an escape from work. It's a crucial part of the process of work, particularly the kind of deep, creative, and meaningful work that truly moves the needle. To truly grasp this, we need to acknowledge that rest isn't a single, undifferentiated state. It manifests in distinct forms, each serving a unique purpose in our restoration and renewal. We can understand these as primarily falling into three interconnected categories: physical rest, mental rest, and spiritual rest. Each dimension needs attention, and neglecting one can undermine the benefits we seek from the others. Physical rest is perhaps the most obvious. It encompasses sleep, but also extends to activities that restore the body's energy and reduce physical fatigue. This includes things like taking short breaks during the workday, to move, stretch, or simply step away from the screen. It involves regular exercise, not just for fitness, but for the restorative effects it has on our physical and mental state. Spending time in nature, enjoying a leisurely walk, or engaging in gentle physical activity can significantly reduce stress and refresh the body. Think of athletes who meticulously plan rest days and recovery protocols. They understand that peak performance is impossible without dedicated physical restoration. Our minds are housed in our bodies, and a depleted physical state directly impacts our cognitive abilities, our mood, and our capacity for focused work. Prioritizing sleep, engaging in mindful movement, and creating rhythms that allow the body to recover are foundational. Beyond the purely physical, we encounter the crucial realm of mental rest. This is about giving the parts of our brain responsible for focused, analytical, and task-oriented thinking a break. Our modern world is a relentless barrage of information, notifications, and demands on our attention. We are constantly on, processing, reacting, planning. This sustained cognitive effort leads to mental fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and reduced creativity. Mental rest involves stepping away from this constant stream of demanding thought. It's not about zoning out passively, but about engaging in activities that allow the mind to wander freely, to process information differently, or to simply be still. Daydreaming, often dismissed as unproductive, is a powerful form of mental rest. It allows the brain's default mode network to activate, fostering creativity, consolidating memories, and helping us make connections we might miss during focused work. Meditation and mindfulness practices fall squarely into this category, quieting the analytical mind and allowing for a different kind of awareness. Engaging in activities that require a different kind of mental effort, perhaps something creative or playful that doesn't carry the pressure of a deadline, can also be deeply restorative. The key is to shift away from the intensity of focused work towards activities that allow for mental spaciousness and a different mode of processing. The third dimension, spiritual rest, might sound abstract, but it's deeply practical. It's not necessarily about religion, though it certainly can be. It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, finding a sense of meaning, purpose, and belonging. It's about engaging in activities that inspire awe, wonder, and a feeling of transcendence. This could involve spending time in nature and feeling a connection to the natural world, engaging deeply in a creative pursuit that absorbs you completely, a state often called flow. Losing yourself in music, art, or literature, or participating in community activities that foster a sense of shared purpose. Spiritual rest replenishes our sense of vitality and reminds us why we do the work we do. It reconnects us to our values and our deeper motivations. When we feel spiritually depleted, work can feel meaningless, draining, and hollow, even if we are technically successful. Cultivating this dimension involves seeking out experiences that evoke these feelings of connection, meaning, and transcendence, reminding us that we are part of something bigger than our immediate tasks and deadlines. Understanding these three dimensions is the first step. The next is recognizing that true productivity comes from a cyclical pattern, periods of intense, focused work followed by deliberate periods of rest. This isn't about a rigid 9-to-5 structure, followed by a complete shutdown. It's about building microcycles and macrocycles of work and rest into our lives. Think of the creative process itself. Often there's a phase of intense research or writing, followed by a period of stepping away, letting the ideas percolate, perhaps through a walk or engaging in a completely different activity. Many great thinkers and artists throughout history intuitively understood this rhythm. Charles Darwin, for instance, famously took long, solitary walks every day. These weren't just breaks, they were essential periods of reflection and incubation where ideas could take shape, connections could be made, and mental fatigue could dissipate. His famous "creativity corresponds to periods of rest" wasn't a contradiction. It was an observation of how his own mind worked best. Consider Jane Austen. She wrote during specific, often brief, windows of time each day, typically when her family was occupied elsewhere. She didn't force herself into long, unbroken stretches of writing. Instead, she carved out manageable periods, likely allowing her mind the space it needed before and after these sessions. This allowed her to maintain a consistent output over time, without succumbing to the burnout that plagues so many writers today. Her method wasn't about maximizing hours logged, it was about optimizing the quality of the time spent writing by respecting the natural limits of focus and the need for mental space. These historical examples highlight a crucial point. The idea that productivity requires constant, uninterrupted effort is a relatively recent and largely flawed cultural construct. We've inherited a Puritan work ethic that often equates work with moral virtue and idleness with sin. In the modern era, this has morphed into a cult of busyness, where staying busy is prioritized over effectiveness and exhaustion is worn as a badge of honor. This narrative tells us that if we're not actively working, we're falling behind. But this perspective ignores the fundamental nature of human cognition and creativity. Deep work, insight, and innovation rarely spring forth from a mind constantly taxed and never allowed to wander or replenish. They often emerge in the spaces between the focused efforts, during periods of rest that allow for incubation, reflection, and the activation of different cognitive processes. The challenge, then, is how to actively cultivate these periods of productive rest in a culture that actively discourages them. It requires a conscious effort to resist the pressure to be constantly available and productive. It means recognizing that saying no to non-essential demands, scheduling breaks, and protecting time for activities that restore us isn't selfish. It's strategic. It's about building intentionality into our days and weeks. This might involve establishing simple rituals. A ritual is a specific activity performed regularly that signals a transition, in this case, a transition from work to rest, or from one type of rest to another. It could be as simple as brewing a cup of tea and sitting by a window for 10 minutes, closing your laptop and going for a short walk around the block without your phone, or dedicating the first hour of your morning to reading something unrelated to work. These rituals act as anchors, helping us to mentally shift gears and engage in rest more deliberately. Think about the concept of a sabbatical. Traditionally a religious or academic concept, the idea of taking extended time off for rest, reflection, and renewal is something we could all benefit from adopting in spirit, even if we can't take 6 months off every 7 years. It's about recognizing the need for periodic, significant breaks to recharge our batteries, gain perspective, and prevent burnout. Even adopting a sabbatical mindset, intentionally stepping back, even for a day or a weekend, to disconnect from the usual pressures and engage in restorative activities, can be incredibly beneficial. It's about creating intentional pauses that allow for deeper processing and rejuvenation than a typical weekend might offer. We must also confront the internal barriers. Guilt is a major obstacle. Many of us feel guilty when we're not actively working or producing. We worry about what others think, or we internalize the cultural message that constant activity equals value. Overcoming this requires reframing our understanding of productivity. True productivity isn't just about the quantity of output. It's about the quality, the sustainability, and the meaning derived from our efforts. Rest isn't the enemy of productivity. It's its essential partner. Learning to embrace rest without guilt is perhaps the most critical step in unlocking our potential for sustained, meaningful achievement. Consider the kinds of activities that facilitate genuine mental rest. It's not just about stopping work, it's about switching modes. Reading a novel, listening to music, playing a musical instrument, engaging in a hobby like gardening or painting, spending quality time with loved ones, or even just allowing yourself to daydream. These are all ways to give your focused thinking brain a break and engage other parts of your mind. These activities often involve a different kind of attention, perhaps more absorption, less analytical pressure. They allow for serendipity and unexpected connections. Think of Archimedes shouting, "Eureka!" in the bath. The insight didn't come during his focused work on the problem, but during a moment of relaxation and displacement. That's the power of letting the mind wander and engage differently. The temptation in our hyper-connected world is to fill every spare moment. Waiting in line? Check email? Commuting? Listen to a podcast related to work. Commercial break? Scroll through social media. While these activities might seem harmless, they often represent missed opportunities for genuine mental rest. They keep our brains tethered to task switching and information processing, preventing the deeper relaxation and mental spaciousness that fosters creativity and insight. Replacing even a few of these moments with mindful breathing, simply observing our surroundings, or letting our thoughts drift can make a significant difference over time. Cultivating spiritual rest requires intentionality in seeking out meaning and connection. This might mean consciously scheduling time for activities that align with our core values, even if they don't seem directly productive in a conventional sense. It could be volunteering for a cause we care about, spending time in conversation with a mentor or friend where we can discuss deeper issues, engaging in practices that foster gratitude, or simply spending time reflecting on what gives our life meaning. These activities replenish our sense of purpose, which is a powerful motivator and source of resilience. When we feel connected to something larger than ourselves, the challenges of daily work often feel more manageable and less overwhelming. It provides perspective and reminds us of the bigger picture. Integrating these forms of rest isn't about adding more tasks to an already overloaded schedule. It's about fundamentally restructuring our approach to time and productivity. It involves identifying the natural rhythms of our own energy and focus, and designing our days and weeks to honor those rhythms. This might mean working in focused bursts, followed by short breaks for physical or mental restoration. It might mean dedicating specific times for deep work and protecting those times fiercely from interruption. It might mean consciously choosing activities that foster spiritual replenishment during evenings or weekends, rather than defaulting to passive consumption or work-related tasks. It requires us to challenge the deeply ingrained cultural narrative that equates constant busyness with success and value. We need to become more discerning about where we invest our energy, recognizing that rest is not a luxury, but a necessity for high performance, creativity, and well-being. It's about shifting from a mindset of doing to a mindset that embraces being and becoming. The goal isn't to eliminate work or effort, but to make our efforts more effective, sustainable, and ultimately, more rewarding. By understanding and actively cultivating physical, mental, and spiritual rest, we can break free from the cycle of burnout and rediscover a more productive, creative, and fulfilling way of living and working. It's a journey of reclaiming our time, our energy, and our attention, not by striving harder, but by learning the profound art of resting well. This shift allows us to move beyond mere activity towards genuine accomplishment and a richer experience of life itself.